Hello everyone, this is Mukundan Raghavan. In previous video we have seen what is MCP and why do we need MCP. And in this video we will briefly understand how MCP architecture looks like. What are the main components of MCP architecture? For this we have the sample diagram in front of you which has the simple structure of MCP architecture. And you can see on your left hand side host application. This is the host application which has the LLM and also MCP client. Let's understand this host application as your any AI application in your system. It could be VS Code, which is having the GitHub Copilot, or it could be any chatbot, or it could be Cloud Desktop. In simple words, it is the application that runs in your local. Since it's the AI application, obviously it will have the LLM in it, which will act like a brain. Now we have the MCP client in it, which is totally responsible to forward our request to the MCP server. And now we will try to understand how the interaction works in the sequential way. First one, user. User gives some inputs to the LLM. Then LLM decides whether it can answer by itself or it has to check some other information. For example, let's say you ask for weather condition. Definitely LLM may not have the current weather condition. So now LLM decides to check with MCP client. Now MCP client is inside the host application. This MCP client is responsible to take care of any API calls or browser search. And every different requirement, we will have the different MCP client. For simplicity, let's consider this MCP client is responsible to get the weather information. Now, in one, user input goes from user to LLM, and number two, this LLM requests to the MCP client. Now, from this MCP client, the request goes to the MCP server. Again, there might be different types of MCP server based on our requirement. For simple understanding, let's consider this MCP server is the MCP server for the weather. Now, MCP server connects with the external system. From the external system, it gets the information. Even MCP server can have tools, prompts, and different other functionalities. We will see other things in some time, but consider MCP server sends the request to the external system and gets the results back. Again, MCP server forwards that response to the MCP client. Now this MCP client gets the information and again it is forwarding to the LLM. Now you have the raw response which you got from the MCP client. Now this raw input will be modified and give the final response to the user. Now this is a simple flow. Now in this you can clearly understand you can have the host application in your local and it will definitely have the LLM and the MCP client. And also based on the different types of need, you may have the different MCP client. You can see like this. Inside the application host, you can have the host, which will be again LLM, and you will have the different clients. That means that based on need, we have client 1, client 2, client 3. And these clients will interact with the different MCP servers to get the information. And here you can see it could be external APIs, it could be files and Git process, it could be database. So based on the different need, we will have that. Finally, we can consider all these things into three main parts: host, client, and servers. Host or LLM application that we discussed. Clients, MCP clients will have one-to-one connection. That means that if you have one MCP server for specific information or specific action, you will have the same MCP client inside your host. And also, servers make the stateful communication, which means every time you make the call to the server, again, you don't need to mention all the information from the scratch. It maintains the state. So from this, we clearly understood how the simple architecture of the MCP looks like: MCP client, MCP server, and host application, and the different ways of communication. And also we have understood how it will have one-to-one communication, MCP client to MCP server, and we can have multiple MCP client inside the host, so are MCP servers. And this is all about this video, and always be a rainbow in others' cloud.